Welcome, everyone. My name is Ronda Chapman, and I am the Equity Director for the Trust for Public Land. And I really want to thank you all for joining us as we talk about various ways we are learning about how to best restore our communities. I know that I'm not the first to say that we are witnessing the ways that people across the US are recommitting ourselves to community and coming together in various ways to restore nature alongside our collective well-being. And we know that doing so requires overcoming multiple hurdles to address the ever complex issues of the global pandemic, of racial injustice, of equity disparities, of threats to human and environmental health, all of which are playing out under the umbrella of this climate crisis that we're all living in. And so today we are going to talk about real world progress around these issues and what they look like when we bring it down to the community level. And we're going to talk about how nature can be one of the most efficient and cost-effective solutions that we have in our tool belt. And that'll include the compounding benefits to our communities. And so before I turn things over to our amazing panel, I do want to share one of my favorite examples from the Trust for Public Land that shows how nature can be a very powerful tool for addressing climate impacts, especially while in helping to enrich and heal a community while also recognizing the importance of history and cultural resilience. And so some of you might recall in 2002, there were heavy rainstorms that generated a flash flood in Vine City and English Avenue neighborhoods in Atlanta. And there were so many people in that neighborhood that were forced to flee. They had to climb out of their windows as water was entering into their homes. And needless to say, the storm and the flood completely upended lives, and it displaced over 100 people, destroying the property in the neighborhoods that had very rich and vibrant histories. And these neighborhoods were home to the iconic leaders such as Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Julian Bond, Maynard Jackson. In those neighborhoods, we had 4 historically Black colleges and universities within those boundaries. And the neighborhoods faced deep social challenges along a long history of disinvestment and injustice, which resulted in, among other challenges, factors such as chronic poor stormwater management. And the flooding, of course, was a hazard to the community and to human health, not only from the disaster and resulting stress, but also from the mold and the mildew that ended up exacerbating asthma and other chronic conditions amongst the community members. And so again, sticking with this theme around community, in order to prevent a similar catastrophe from occurring again, the community joined together, they organized, and they activated around a shared goal of reducing flood risk, of improving community vibrancy. And so in 2016, many partners, including the Trust for Public Land, began working with residents and organizers to inform the design of the Rodney Cook Senior Park Community Voice, the Rodney Cook Senior Park, my goodness. In that instance, community voice and neighborhood resilience were at the center of the work. And so now that it's completed, the 16-acre park design includes state-of-the-art engineering that can absorb 9 million gallons of stormwater during a 100-year storm event. For those of you who are following climate change impacts, these are numbers that are really important to you and important to the community. And that is, the impact is going to reduce flood vulnerability for 150 acres in the surrounding neighborhood land. And so this stormwater capture protects Atlanta's residents by preventing the pollutants from entering their drinking water. And the Rodney Cook Senior Park design features a more resilient community. It's a climate change response that continues to impact the region. And so that example is just one in which community leadership came together, designed for resilience, and then the partnerships were able to sustain change for generations. This is a sustainable effort. And so with that, I'm going to make it less about myself and the things that I get excited about and get you all excited about the amazing leaders that we have here with us today. They're going to share their own experiences about the hurdles, the solutions, the partnerships, the transformational work that has been occurring in their communities. And I couldn't be more excited to welcome them here today. Joining us today, we have Donna Chavis, who is with the RedTailed Hawk Collective. She is the founder and the convener there. She's also a senior campaigner with Friends of the Earth USA. We have Dr. Yomi Noibi. He's the executive director of the Environmental Community Action, Inc., affectionately known as Eco Action. And we also have Veronica Padilla-Campos. She is the executive director of Pacoima Beautiful. I'm not going to go into their bios. I think that you all have access to the bios via the app and the website. And so I also imagine that you've already done your homework. You've had a chance to investigate who you're going to be learning and hearing from today. So what I'd like to do is kind of kick things off with you, Donna, and ask you to open us up by telling us a bit about yourself and the work your organization is leading right now. Donna?
Nemosa, and thank you so much, Ronda. And thank you to all of ACLS for this opportunity. And I will not, I come from an oral tradition, so I do have notes so that I don't talk too long, because there are so many stories to tell, of course. I am all that you said, Rhonda, but I'm also a Lumbee elder coming to you today from Pembroke, North Carolina, which is the ancestral home of the Lumbee peoples. We are located in the coastal plains of North Carolina. And as everyone knows, location today is critical in so many ways around how we're affected by climate change and all of the issues related to that. In my area, we are number one in the state of North Carolina for heat-related illnesses because we are in the southeastern sector of coastal plains. It's always been hot, but it's so much hotter. We're also in an area called the Hurricane Alley. And since 2016, we have been hit by two major storms. In 2016, Hurricane Matthew, and then in 2018, Florence. And those were 500-year storms. So we are looking at tremendous impact in terms of our the properties, how they were affected, and how the floodplain has been changed since 2016. I want to share a little bit, too, of some other things that happened since 2016. One of the major issues we faced was the effort to place the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, which was a pipeline 600 miles long running from West Virginia through Virginia and then ending in North Carolina. Now, along that 600-mile route, there was numerous impacted communities of peoples of color, low-income people. And in North Carolina specifically, there was over 30,000 indigenous peoples along the route who were going to be impacted. And yet, in the planning for this pipeline, it was not determined that that was any sort of disproportionate impact. So part of what my work has been is to try to make the invisible visible. Communities that I've been working with for 45 years have come together in so many ways to not only build, but to rebuild their communities as they were hit by economic and also the environmental impacts of hurricanes and the heat indexes. But when these pipelines began to come about, it was like I'll use the term sucker punch, because it came to the public eye around the same time that Matthew hit. So we say in 2016, we had two disasters, the Hurricane Matthew, and then the effort to site the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. Now, thankfully, that pipeline was terminated in July 5th of 2020. That took a lot of effort from many communities across the 3 states, but it was an exercise in, again, how communities can be strengthened during the times of challenge. And they can learn more about the things that they need to prepare for, not only during natural occurrences like hurricanes, but during unnatural occurrences like efforts to disturb the natural ways of their peoples and to impact the rivers and also other parts of their community through these sorts of efforts. So one of the things that happened, though, on July 5th, we've now declared that Interdependence Day because it recognizes how we all came together and worked in relationship to the efforts to not have that pipeline situated in our communities. But one thing that happened was that wasn't the end. There's now efforts to site the Mountain Valley Pipeline. There's the Robinson Liquefied Natural Gas Facility, a proposed wood pellet scheme known as AERP facility, and a Dominion Gas and Smithville Farms proposed factory farm gas facility known as Align RNG. As you can see, we don't have any shortage in terms of things that are impacting our communities. One of the most important parts of my work has been to help communities talk through where their natural strengths are. After Matthew, the elders in the community met with the community gatherings held by the state to talk about what had happened and the unusual flooding. Because the flooding was not just along the Lumbee River, it was inland as well. And it was learned at that time that these elders had tried to advise state officials that this was bound to happen. They had paid attention to the deforestation that was happening. They had paid attention to the way that pipeline routes had been laid and the kind of tunnel effect that was going to occur over time if those were not corrected in some fashion. And so they attempted to advise the state officials to say, if something is not done around these areas, then we're going to have horrible floods in the future. Well, that is exactly what happened in 2016. The flooding from Matthew, and then in 2018, the flooding from Florence was historic, and its impact on this particular area, although it was throughout North Carolina. This is an example for me where our elders, especially the indigenous elders, know how nature has worked over time. It is not something that has happened just today. They discuss, as an example, the fact that over history, the tribal nations did not build homes or their family placements along the river because they knew that was not wise. They knew that there could be flooding at any point. They also paid attention to the care and making sure that the woodlands and the forest areas were kept healthy so that they were there to absorb water. They were there to help to care for their life as the people were expected to care for the life of nature. In 2016, those warnings did not pay heed. But in 2018, when Florence came, there was a little bit more attention given. So as they began to look at ways to protect the homes and businesses after the second major storm, they listened to the elders and began to look at ways to set up some dams and gates so that the water could be held back, knowing that the water was going to come and that there had been communities built in these territories that were going to be impacted, looking for ways to intervene. And now they're in conversations with the communities to see how they can protect into the future. I want to say that I'm very proud to be a member of the Lumbee Nation, which is a part of the 5% of global indigenous populations that protects 80% of the biodiversity. And I think as you look around the globe, it is obvious that it is not just us against nature, but that we are a part of nature. We are a part of the answer that that we need to solve as we're moving forward. I was told once by an elder that humans were the last to the party, meaning in terms of evolution, and that we were invaders to the territories of all the other life forms. And because of that, we need to be more respectful. We need to listen to the messages that we receive from the natural world, and also put actions in place that will protect those behaviors. After all, humans are a part of the animal world. We are not separated from those very things that we seem to try to control. And one of the things I would like to end with is that in the native way, our natural world is not seen as a resource. They are sources of life. There are things that protect us, that elevate us, sometimes challenge us, but they are sources. When we commodify those sources of life into resources, we're taking a huge step away from our relationship with the natural world. And that it is important, again, that we see ourselves as a part of that natural world, and that it is our job to protect it. And as we're protecting it, the family will protect us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Donna. I really appreciate that framing, and I'm particularly drawn to this notion of Interdependence Day. I think that sometimes it's easy to get stuck in the culture around independence and individualism. And as I'm listening to you share about interconnectedness and about interdependence, and we think about the ecosystem that we all exist in, and how much we as humans, even though we were the last to the party, are very much a part of that. And, you know, when we're talking about addressing climate change, it's not a singular issue. It has a significant level of complexities associated with that is interdependent. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate that framing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So Dr. Yomi, I've known you for a few years now, and I feel like you can't get away from me. I'm always going I'm always going to be in your world. I'm really grateful for that. And I would love if you could kick us off with some of your opening comments. And then after you're concluded, I'll ask Veronica to share with us. Dr. Yomi?
Thank you very much, Ronda. I will want to thank you for bringing us here, for the organizers of this conference, and our first speaker, Donna. My takeaway from your conversation is source of life and not resources of life. That's my takeaway. That's very important. And the little that I shared this afternoon, I will be asking a question at the end. What is your takeaway? I am representing environmental community action. I'm the executive director, and what do? You know, try to get support, resources to do the work. Our work center on the three issues: threats to human health, environmental degradation, and social injustice. So in the process of doing that, we promote a safe and healthy environment by helping Georgia communities organize to address those three intersections, particularly threats to human health. And we do that so that they can eliminate air, land, and water pollution. That's the end goal. So in the process of doing this, the word I say, we help people to organize. What does that mean? We help people to empower themselves so that they can have their own voice to do what they want to do for demand for clean air. And in the process of doing that, how do we actually do that? We listen and listen until we get the truth from ourselves and from them. Sometimes when people talk, they talk more about the symptoms of the problem and not the cause of the problem. And Eco Action would like to help communities to look at the root causes so that they can eventually overcome the problems from climate change, from whatever they want. The work that we do are defined by the communities, one. And then we help them to look at the root causes, and in the process of doing that, we ask 3 organizing questions. What do you want? That will help us establish the long-term and short-term goals. Then 2, who has the power to give it to you? And that is the power analysis. If we do that well, 9 out of 10, the community will win based on experience. And then the 3rd question is, how do you get it? That is the strategy and the tactics. If we miss number 2, we're just throwing darts, and we don't throw darts. We don't have the resources to throw that. We don't have the sources of life, as my sister said, to throw that because we are so limited. So when we do that so well, then we help them to take action. And while they're taking action, we serve as a support system. This is very important. You tell somebody to go to war, you know it's going to be difficult. You have to provide support for them to keep, because they get tired. I get tired, don't you all? So we have to create our own support system, and we help them create their own support system to keep on going on, because we're not fighting for today, we're fighting for the long haul. That is, in essence, how we operate. But the issues that we're addressing has to do with, flooding. It's a major issue, as Ronda pointed out, English Avenue and Vine City in particular. We are working not just in Proto Creek, but in Entrenchment Creek. Those are 2 watersheds in Atlanta that Eco Action is heavily invested in. And we can't do this without our partners. Let me say that openly. Partners like the Conservation Fund, American Rivers, these are the partners that give us the courage. That's not correct, Yomi. They help us leverage our relationship so that we can get what we want for the people, so that the people can get, not just protect the watershed, but do what? But also advocate for equitable development. For example, Lindsay Street Park is a self-purpose park. The Conservation Fund provided the leadership in 2015. They brought somebody from their office in North Carolina to come and teach people about the issues of injustice. And they thought it was just for the people. It was also for the leadership here in Atlanta. And at the end of the day, we have now a self-purpose park that community people are benefiting from. Eco Action was involved in the community engagement of this process, but we have to speak loud. So that's what we do. In summary, we don't claim anything. Everything that we do is to the glory of the people we serve. And when we serve them, we stand behind and keep supporting them. So in essence, Eco Action, we're here for 30 plus years, and then we'll be here for another 30 years, but it will be addressing people to have their own voice so that they can demand for clean air, clean water, and clean land. That is in summary.
Thank you. And I'll be coming back with questions for you to go into some detail. But for now, Veronica, would love to hear from you and the work you're leading at Pacoima Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you for inviting me today. This has been an amazing production. Us that have been behind the scenes can tell you. I'm very impressed and just really thankful for everyone here that I'm sharing this panel with. Just to tell you a little bit about Pacoima Beautiful, we are in Los Angeles, up north in the city of Los Angeles. And so Pacoima Beautiful, I'm going to read a little bit, by the way. I need to. So Pacoima Beautiful was founded in 1996 by 5 relentless mothers who became distraught with the unpleasant sight of trash and toxic smells that they endured while they were walking their young children to school. They knew that the only way to create a safer and cleaner community for their children and neighbors was through collective action. And so, like good neighbors, they joined forces to bring some of Pacoima's first major community cleanups and tree planting events. The beautification projects of our founding mothers set the grassroots foundation that our historically women-led organization has stood for the past 22 years. Today, Pacoima Beautiful is the only environmental justice organization in the Northeast San Fernando Valley striving for community improvement. Pacoima Beautiful is, Pacoima, I should say, is comprised of 24 census tracts averaging about 100,000 residents. 85% are Latino and 8% are African American. Pacoima is made up of predominantly single-family homes. Some are in very large lots, so there's a lot of conversions, extension of homes or structures that are put on the same property that are not always up to code and are very safe. So there is this invincible density that I like to say for Pacoima, where there's 2 or 3 families living within one household. There are several frontline communities like Pacoima within the county of Los Angeles, but what makes us unique is the dense concentration of industrial uses. We have a small municipal airport in the middle of our community. There's a rail line that bisects the community. There are 3 freeways that surround us. There are over 13 landfills within the area. Granted, they're not all active, but they're still very much impacting our environment. We have incinerators, there's recycling centers, auto body shops, an energy generating station, and the list goes on. Any kind of yucky industry you can think of is probably at the Northeast, located in the Northeast San Fernando Valley. So because of this, residents suffer a lot from different health issues, but we also suffer from the lack of open space. There's about 0.6 acres of park space for every 1,000 residents, significantly lower than the county's average of 3.3 acres per 1,000 residents. So there's little to no access to places to exercise, play, experience nature, and it really is a problem exacerbated by these overcrowding neighborhoods, right? But around 2016, Pacoima Beautiful completed an urban greening plan for Pacoima. It was a result of years of community engagement, developing a menu of multi-benefit projects that would not only green the community, but would infiltrate water, provide education, safety for pedestrians, and overall beautify our neighborhood. In 2020, the Bradley Plaza and Green Alley project was the first of the urban greening projects that was built. It was a huge win, right? The community was not just visioning, but actually saw it put into practice. And this community design project has transformed a crumbling, neglected alley into a vibrant community space. Bradley Plaza and Green Alley is the first planned shared street in the city of Los Angeles. It's designed to slow traffic, create a safe place for community members to relax, meet up with neighbors, walk, bike. And the planters, they serve as part of the stormwater capture, and they infiltrate the water. And when it rains, the water in the alley flows into the planters and infiltrates down through soil and gravel, replenishing the aquifer and naturally cleaning the stormwater. This project will capture maybe 2 million gallons of stormwater per year, so it's really going to reduce runoff and will support our environment. Flooding is a big issue in our community. We lack a lot of infrastructure. So the San Fernando Valley is also significantly hot in the summer months. This, combined with the lack of shade and low tree canopy coverage and the industrial pollutants, creates conditions for the urban heat island effect and heat-related illnesses. Growing our tree canopy not only provides shades and lowers the amount of heat absorbed, but it also helps clean the air. The greening, the infrastructure projects help us answer a lot of different needs from the community. So cleaning the air, cooling the temperature, and creating safe places for our kids to go and play. It's really great when the community can see their vision come alive in these projects, but it really takes the stars aligning to make this happen. So just to end with giving a shout out to many of our partners, like the Trust for Public Lands, the Los Angeles Sanitation and Environment Department, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, and some of our partners like LA Waterkeeper, the Liberty Hill Foundation, CRA, And really thanks to the community residents that put up with a very long construction project. We anticipated to be 3 months and ended up being almost 6. But I think that we ended up with a beautiful project that we can all be proud of. And just wanted to thank you again for the opportunity to talk about Pacoima Beautiful, share what we do, and tell you about this project that has really transformed our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. So far, we've had an opportunity to hear from these really powerful leaders that we have that are really restoring community. We've heard from Donna about how the back-to-back hurricanes have really impacted the communities in the Carolinas, and how the elders really had to come forward and say, listen, we're going about this all the wrong way. And so they've been able to identify that vulnerability and the ways that nature can be used as a tool to increase the resilience to these storms, so that people and the wildlife can actually thrive in a way and in relation with one another. And then with Veronica, we're hearing about green alleys and green together, and how people recognized there was a problem. They came together, they organized, they found partners and brought everybody together. We heard about from Dr. Yomi, a very well-structured approach into the ways that Eco Action is able to uplift community by asking them, what do they want? Who has the power, and how do we get that power so that it's distributed? So I'm really, really grateful for those examples that you all shared. We have just a few minutes left, and I've got questions of my own, but we have one question that has been shared, and this question is for you, Donna. And that is, how difficult is it for Native American voices to be heard by elected leaders? Do you have any advice on the best ways to be effective?
That's an excellent question. As you know, the percentage of population in the United States is not large for Native peoples. The populations have been decimated over centuries now through disease and various other means. In total, we're 2% of the population. However, what we have found in modern times, in these times now, is that the stories of Native peoples and their relationship to the lands and the ways that they want to be beneficial, not just for ourselves, but for the entire country, that those stories are resonating with a larger percentage of the population. And so our voices are being heard more through news coverage and through narratives that are being taken through documentaries. When I first started organizing work, I was told by one reporter that if you want to get anything about Indigenous peoples on the news, you plan it for Thanksgiving, because that's the only time news paid attention to Native peoples. Unfortunately, it was true. And I don't have a storehouse of all the times that that's the case, but you might even remember, this is sort of on the negative, but every Thanksgiving football game was Cowboys and Redskins. And so everyone was cheering for America's team, which was the Cowboys, of course. They branded themselves that, and it stays till today. So we never did feel that we had a positive venue for being heard. But what we have been able to do now is to move our histories from the oral tradition into some of the written traditions. They're able now to be shared with others and for people to come forward. Where I live, the Native population is now 42%. In the 2010 census, it was the first time in over 100 years that we crossed the line of being the majority population. And so you might imagine we are being listened to by politicians because our vote counts. And I think that's an important thing that we have learned throughout Indian country, is that our vote counts. It counted greatly in the last election in the Southwest, where even though they were one of the most hardest hit populations in the country, the Navajo organizers showed up and came out in higher percentages than the norm. So it's through the kind of things that Dr. Yomi was just talking about, intentional organizing, knowing what you're going after, where the power lies, and how you influence that.
Well, there's a lot packed into that response there, Donna, and I wish we had about 2 more times just to talk about that football tradition. Thank you for naming that, and even the parts that are a little bit uncomfortable and less favorable, because that is part of the full story. And I think that it's important as we are organizing and strategizing for the future generations to not shy away from that, the balance of the successes and the losses and the tensions that exist in between. So thank you for bringing that up. I have another question. This is for all of you. And that is, can any of you share an example at the project level where greening strategies are working to improve health, climate, and equity challenges? Great question. I'll turn to you, Dr. Yomi, because I think, oh, Donna, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to mention that there's one that is emerging now in North Carolina through the production of hemp. Hemp was a traditional plant for the indigenous peoples of the Carolinas because it not only was used for products, but it also had a healing capacity. It had herbal remedies, and so it returns value to the soil rather than just taking it out. So there's a number of benefits to begin to look. As you can imagine, it took a lot of work at the legislative level to get hemp accepted because it had the label the cannabis. Of course, it's a completely different plant, but after crossing those hurdles, we're now seeing that that will be a renewal for the agricultural sector, especially in our communities.
Thank you, Donna. Dr. Yomi, when you are talking about health and equity and climate, the project level and the greening strategies that you all have been deploying in the Atlanta region with Proctor Creek, et cetera, can you provide an example there?
Yeah, let me be very clear by saying that Proctor Creek is an impaired creek. It's polluted. It runs from downtown Atlanta all the way to Bankhead. It's the only watershed that is within the city limit of Atlanta. And as a result of that, it got federal attention and we wanted to support it to reduce the damages. And Eco Action was working in the community. And later on, we get support from EPA to do green infrastructure in that community. In the process of doing that, we realized that people are really, really living in homes that are, bad in the sense of people living with asthma, people living in mold. So what we end up doing, we partner with Emory University to conduct a study. This was a community-driven study. At the end of the day, we got findings to show that an increase in asthma was more prevalent in that community than at the national average. And we have a study that was even published that I can share with you at a later date. The point is, it shows some relationship. It didn't show cause and effect. It's very important. It shows some relationship. As a result of that, the community, we gave some strategies. The community took that and ran with it and then follow up with another study. This is very important. The community took the findings and then they took ownership of that and made it their own. And so that they can have interventions to improve their health. And they got support from the city, from some foundations to help reduce, make their homes more healthy. So Yomi, I have a sign that says it's not just affordable homes, but healthy homes. That became the fashion for many, since 2015. So we did that to highlight the equity of protecting our health. People cannot be living in that mess. You can't, but they do. So by exposing that, it got attention and people are helping that. But in addition to that, we have at the HBCU, Atlanta University colleges at the high elevation. Because of the EPA grant, we were able to work with students and faculty to develop 9 conceptual plans to capture 40 million gallons of stormwater. If not captured, we go downstream to English Avenue and Vine City, which is where we have the African-American people, low-income people living. And it's very important to reduce the impact of pollutants being carried through the stormwater through flooding. And that is where we are right now. We have developed the conceptual plan. They have been transformed to construction design. Spelman College is providing leadership for this at the AUC. They've already adopted the conceptual plan. They are putting it into use. Other colleges are following suit right now. The point I'm making is, there is a connection, my people, between climate impact and how we have to put equity in not just protecting the Proto Creek. One of my participants in what we call the Atlanta Watershed Learning Network. We have raised so many stewards that now have their own voices and do challenge their leaders. This is what I learned. This is what we should do. And they're saying that, and it's making a difference. They're moving the needle with that. So with Eco Action, we help raise community capacity, not just Eco Action, and our partners, WAWA, I mean, the Conservation Fund, the American Rivers, all our partners help. But WAWA and Eco Action will provide the training, to the people so that they develop their own capacity, not just to protect the watershed, but to be an advocate for equitable development. This is very important. Why? Because we have developed principles of equity and how to encourage the developers to put this into use. For example, the Cook Park that you mentioned, Ronda, Trust for Public Land listen to the people. Otherwise, it would not be what it is today. They listen. And when you listen, you hear the truth and you reflect and you make changes. That goes for me. That goes for all of us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yomi. So as you and Donna are talking about different strategies for investing in these greening projects, so whether it's hemp, whether it's working with stormwater in the park, you've got funding that can be coming from the environmental protection agencies and a couple of community partners on a very local level. Veronica, as you were talking about Pacoima and its origin story, and you were giving a description of the conditions, in some spaces we would refer to the neighborhoods that you were working within as environmental justice communities. And those kind of restoration projects require funding. And so it would be wonderful to hear from you about how you're able to elevate the community's project and secure funding, because this work is, one federal grant is only going to take you so far. So can you talk a little bit about elevating that for funding?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I think that first we had, like Dr. Yomi has said, we have to listen to the community and what they need. And because there's so much going on in the community, so many cumulative impacts, that any project that you do has to have multiple benefits to address multiple concerns in the neighborhood. It can't just do one thing. Because these funds are so limited, you have to make sure that each project can do more than one thing. And you have to listen to what the community wants. I remember that when we were going through the design process for the alley, some of the designers were telling us that certain things that they wanted wouldn't look pretty, wouldn't be cute. And we have to push back and remind them that this was a project for us, that this is what we needed it to look like. So once we got through the design process, finding the funding to build it really was, we got lucky, honestly. And that's unfortunate, right? We have to wait for the stars to align for projects in our communities to happen. But the truth is we did get lucky on this one, where CRA, the Community Redevelopment Agency, had funds for this area. So fortunately, there was a pot there. And then one of the polluting businesses in the community were sued and had to give money to a water project. And fortunately, we had our design ready, so the money went to this project. And then the council office also had some discretionary funds, so they put some money in. And the Department of Water and Power wanted to keep the water that was collected, so they put some money in. And then LA Sanitation had some resources too, and they wanted to be part of this alley development project within the city, so they came in. So it was a lot of different pots of money that had to go in, and I have to credit Trust for Public Lands because they're the ones that really kept all that budget together. Pacoima Beautiful was really in charge of ensuring that the community was involved throughout the process and were informed about what was going on. And we were the folks that they came to if there was an issue, and we helped resolve that. And that's why it's so important for us to have the right projects, because some of these partners will go away. Pacoima Beautiful is going to stay in the community. So we have to make sure that these projects reflect the community, that are maintained long after, and that they continue serving its purpose and serving the community and addressing so many of the problems that impact our community.
Thank you so much. I think we might be about 2 minutes over time, but there's so many things that came up, and we're talking about intergenerational learning, whether it's our elders, whether it's the students at the university, and the mothers that have young children that are all organizing and responding to the needs of the community, and then making sure that folks are being heard and listened to, that folks are given the agency to speak their piece. This is what I need. This is what you are accountable for. And that's a very, very powerful model around restoring communities. So I just want to thank you so much for sharing your time and your brilliance. I know that everybody's email boxes are probably flooding with requests right now. So thank you for coming here. And thank you also to the summit leaders and the organizers. It's been a pleasure. I hope to see you all again, and I wish you all the best. Take good care.
Thank you.